Okay, we're now going to be studying the digestive system, and digestion is when the food you eat is broken down. This is called digestion, and we're looking at the digestive system. So think of the digestive system as one big long tube. So this is our tube. The digestive system isn't straight, but it is a tube. The top of the tube is the mouth. The bottom of the tube is the anus, where you poop the food out. Now let's have a look at this apple. This apple, for it to get into the digestive system, we have to make the apple a lot smaller. And the purpose of the digestive system is to turn the food of the apple into really, really, really small pieces. And that will sort of happen partway down the digestive system. So let's say here the apple pieces are really, really small. And then the food has to come out of the tube and go into the blood. Because then the blood can carry the food to all the cells. And then the third part of the digestive system is we poop out all the parts of the apple, such as, some of the skin that we can't digest, some of the pips. All the undigested food is pooped out as waste. So 3 functions of the digestive system: convert the food into very, very small particles. Second part is for these particles to get into the bloodstream. Third part is for the undigested part of the apple to be pooped out as waste. Okay, let's look at the mouth now. The mouth is where the food is chewed and swallowed. The teeth break down the food into small parts. This is called mechanical digestion. So think of the teeth as machines. We also have chemical digestion taking place because in the saliva there is an enzyme that breaks down the starch into sugar. So if you put a cracker in your mouth and chew on it and let it sit in your mouth for a while, the starch will be broken down into sugar. Okay, so I said in the mouth the starch is broken down into sugar. For starch, think bread, crackers, rice, pasta, potatoes. And what starch is a bunch of sugar molecules joined together. And when they're attacked by chemicals, enzymes in the saliva, the bonds between the sugar molecules are broken, and so we end up with sugar. So carbohydrates, a bunch of sugar molecules joined together. If we break those bonds, the sugar can then be used by the body. So the chemical in the saliva that breaks down the starch is called an enzyme, and you'll hear about enzymes all the way through the digestive system. So in this little animation, this is our enzyme molecule, and this is our food molecule. So I'm going to show you what happens when the enzyme and food meet. So the enzyme breaks the food up into smaller particles. And if another food particle comes along, same thing can happen. So the enzyme keeps working to break down the food particles. Many different types of enzyme are present. The one in the mouth breaks down the starch into sugar molecules. Okay, so we finished with the mouth, and we're now going to look at the esophagus. And the esophagus is this tube that goes from the mouth to the stomach. And this tube is a muscle, and this is how it works. Okay, this is showing peristalsis taking place. And so the muscles of the esophagus squeeze the food down from the mouth to the stomach. There is also mucus lining the esophagus so that the food can slip down quite nicely. So this is peristalsis. Okay, we're now going to look at the stomach. So here is our stomach. Again, we have mechanical digestion taking place. Again, mechanical digestion in the mouth involves the teeth breaking up the food into smaller bits. In the stomach is a muscle, and it squeezes the food and sort of turns it into mush. We also have some chemical digestion taking place. We have another enzyme, and this enzyme breaks down the proteins into smaller pieces. We also have acid in the stomach, that helps this enzyme work, and the acid in the stomach kills any bacteria that are on our food. We now come into the small intestine. So the small intestine is in here. The small intestine is actually longer than the large intestine. So the blue one is the large intestine. The small intestine can be up to 6 meters long. It's called small because the diameter is smaller than that of the large intestine. Lots goes on in the small intestine, and this is where the digestion of the food finishes. And then the food, as it goes through the small intestine, the food is completely broken down, and this is where the food passes into the blood. And then I can just show you where that happens. So this is a close-up of the small intestine, and there are some little bumps on the small intestine. These bumps are called villi. So this is a villi. Now, the yellow represents the digested food, and it's small enough now to go through the walls of the villi and get into the bloodstream. So the small intestine is covered with all these little bumps called villi, and close up of the villi, the food can go through the villi wall and get into the bloodstream. Okay, so the small intestine, which is here, gets some help from an organ called the liver. The liver makes a substance called bile, which breaks down the fat particles into smaller fat particles. So you've got a big lump of fat, it will break down to smaller lumps of fat. The bile is stored in the gallbladder, and this gets sent to the small intestine via a tube, and I can show you on this picture here. So here's our liver, here's the gallbladder, and can you see this little tube that goes into the small intestine. So small intestine is the start of the small intestine. Bile comes in, which helps break down the fat into smaller particles. Okay, so this shows the liver, the gallbladder, going into the small intestine. We also, the small intestine also has some help from an organ called the pancreas. The pancreas makes 3 enzymes that break down. One enzyme continues to break down the starch, one breaks down the fat, one breaks down the protein, and these enzymes head straight into the small intestine. So that's why the small intestine, all the food in our body can be broken down completely. Okay, so the food in the small intestine is going into the blood, but the undigested food gets sent into the large intestine. In the large intestine we have bacteria that feed on this undigested food that make us vitamins, such as vitamin K. There's also a lot of water in this undigested food, and this water is put back into the blood. So the food comes all the way around through here. It then ends up in the rectum. So the rectum is where our poop is stored and sort of shaped. And then right at the bottom of the rectum is the anus, and the anus is a muscle, so we can decide when to eliminate this waste.